23 minutes past 1, on the morning of April the 26th, 1986, the world was seconds away from its worst ever nuclear accident. Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Soviet Union exploded. Five minutes later, a phone call, recorded at the time, is the first alert of a tragedy in the making. By morning, the physical devastation was revealed, but much worse was to come. The disaster at Chernobyl brought death and disease. It brought the very idea of nuclear power into question. And within the Soviet Union, the trauma of Chernobyl was so great that many see it as the first step in the breakup of the communist regime. This film tells the story, minute by minute, second by second, of the 1-hour countdown to tragedy. It's seen through the eyes of the key actors in the drama, the workers who were accidentally led to their deaths, and the innocent bystanders who looked on. Based on documented evidence and eyewitness reports, it has been filmed on location inside the surviving areas of the Chernobyl nuclear power station. The control room at Chernobyl's reactor number 4. It is here that all the key decisions in the coming hour will be taken. The future of the reactor and the world beyond is in the hands of 3 men. At only 26, Leonid Toptunov is senior control engineer. His job is to control the enormous power in the reactor.
17.
Alexander Akimov is the shift foreman, the captain of the ship.
Ну что, все выспались? Поужинали нормально?
But tonight he is outranked.
Начнем, пожалуй.
Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov is in charge.
Потом.
Dyatlov is one of the Soviet Union's top nuclear engineers. He's also a hard man, operating in a harsh system. There is a further vital character, the newly commissioned reactor number 4 itself, one of the communist regime's proudest technological achievements. Tonight, the control room is preparing for a safety test on the reactor.
Мощность упала почти до 500 мегаватт.
А что с Ларом?
Я отключаю локальный автоматический регулятор мощности реактора.
But a fateful argument is brewing between the 2 senior engineers and Dyatlov about the level of power at which it is safe to begin the test.
Орден включился, но все равно мощность падает.
Продолжайте.
Что происходит? Вы же не должны опускаться ниже нормы 700 мегаватт. Это же небезопасно. Что я ему скажу?
Я ему сам скажу.
Не надо мне ничего говорить. Я все знаю сам. Думать не твоя работа. Здесь я принимаю решение. Делай, что тебе говорят. Это набрал каких-то наглых карасей.
Анатолий Степанович, мы и так
On this night, Chernobyl is harboring 2 deadly secrets.
700 мегаватт.
The first is a potentially fatal flaw in the reactor's design, which the engineers are unaware of. A flaw that makes it highly unstable when run at low power. The second secret concerns the man in charge. Anatoly Dyatlov's own history is scarred by the very technology he is seeking to dominate. Tonight, Dyatlov and the reactor will face each other in a battle of strength that will destroy them both. "31 minutes past midnight. The argument over the power level at which the safety test on Chernobyl's reactor number 4 can begin grows ever more serious.
Анатолий Степанович, мы и так уже опустились ниже уровня безопасности в 700 мегаватт. Мощность падает очень быстро.
Единственное, что здесь нестабильно, так это работа твоих некомпетентных людей.
The test has been demanded by Russia's atomic energy authorities and stems from the Cold War fear of being attacked that still grips the Soviet Union. But Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov is deliberately ignoring top-level advice on how the test should be done. The guidelines state that the reactor's power should be between 700 and 1,000 megawatts when the test begins. Dyatlov wants to do the test at only 200 megawatts to preserve the cooling water that stops the reactor overheating. He believes there is little risk. To get things done, shortcuts and improvisation are sometimes the only answer. Winding the power down has led to it dropping too fast.
Что там у тебя?
Ну, мощность быстро падает.
Ты что натворил, идиот? Что ты наделал? Ты же мощность упустил! Это же руки из задницы растут! Да помоги ты ему!
Успокойся, успокойся, не суетись. Начинаем все сначала. Успокойся.
"24 minutes to 1. A new problem disturbs the concentration of the increasingly fraught operators.
Да выключи этот вой!
Уровень воды в барабан-сепараторах опасно низкий.
Давай соберись, это твоя работа.
Senior Unit Control Engineer Boris Stolyarchuk controls the flow of water through the reactor. He's all too used to alarms like this. 22 minutes to 1. The reactor has ground to a complete halt. Dyatlov makes a fateful decision.
Ты же уронил реактор! Имбецил ты долбанный! Ну давай, поднимай мощность! Выводи регулирующие стержни! Бегом!
Control rods are the accelerator and the brakes of the nuclear reactor. Below the 50-foot reactor lid are 1,661 uranium-filled fuel rods, which descend into the reactor's core. The splitting of the uranium atoms releases enormous heat from the fuel rods, which turns water into steam. The steam drives the giant turbine, which generates electricity. To control this power, 211 boron control rods are spread throughout the reactor's core. If they're raised, power accelerates. If they're taken out altogether, the engineers lose their ability to apply the brakes. Yet that is exactly what Dyatlov tells his men to do.
Извините, Анатолий Степанович, но разве мы не должны остановить реактор? И так положено по инструкции.
Это верно, Анатолий Степанович. Это абсолютно верно. Если мы извлечем регулирующие стержни, управлять реактором нам после этого становится почти невозможно.
Как же испытания не проводить из-за таких кретинов, как вы? Испытание будет проведено сегодня! А тебе я скажу. Если ты не хочешь или не можешь выполнять приказания, я могу избавить тебя от этой необходимости. Ты меня понял?
Да.
Пошел вон! Ригу, прими управление!
Начали. Так, осторожнее.
The men's revolt has failed. Tregub and Akimov power up the reactor.
Хорошо. Отлично. Прекрасно.
Within 5 minutes, they've got power rising again. Dyatlov has what he wants.
Мне удалось поднять мощность реактора до 160 мегаватт.
Ладно, передай управление Топтунову. Вперед, вперед. Только не уходи и постой с ним рядом.
The control room staff have every reason to fall in line. 8 minutes to 1. Another alarm.
Уровень воды в барабан-сепараторе опасно низкий.
Ну разберись, там не маленький.
Three minutes past 1. After the failed revolt, the control room is now calm too.
Мы снова вышли на 200 мегаватт.
The men have got the reactor's power to the level Deputy Chief Engineer Dyatlov wants it for the test.
Анатолий Степанович, мы снова вышли на мощность в 200 мегаватт.
Очень хорошо. Начинайте испытания.
Но по регламенту начинать испытания я могу только при мощности в 700 мегаватт. Если вы хотите проводить испытания при уровне мощности в 200 мегаватт, я прошу вас занести это ваше распоряжение в оперативный журнал.
Да будет вам известно, что как заместитель главного инженера я имею полномочия изменить параметры проведения испытаний. И я ими воспользуюсь. Продолжайте испытания.
The water shortage continues to set off alarms, but still none of these engineers believes a serious accident is possible. Even the safety-conscious Alexander Akimov, who does understand the technology, has officially estimated the chances of an accident at Chernobyl as 1 in 10 million per year. But Akimov and his colleagues do not know the reactor as well as they think. They are the victims of years of cover-up and negligence. Now, at Chernobyl, all these chickens are coming home to roost. Something deadly serious is happening in the reactor's core that no one in the control room is aware of. The few boron control rods still in the reactor are only partially inserted at the top, so power is building into a hotspot at the bottom of the core where the sensors don't always detect it. The reactor is now an invisible ticking time bomb. "12 minutes past 1. The growing pressure inside Chernobyl's reactor number 4 is matched by the pressure within the man controlling the night's events, Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov. Dyatlov remains determined to push through the safety test, despite the opposition in the control room.
Соберись.
One reason may be power station politics. Dyatlov is in trouble with the local Communist Party for being rude to his workers. But Dyatlov also holds a darker, more personal secret.
3. Ой, тонкой струйкой он мочится. Вот такой же толщины должно быть.
1:17 a.m. Less than 6 minutes to the start of the safety test. Dyatlov is confident.
На 200 мегаваттах расход воды небольшой. Мы сможем повторить испытания, если что.
Но до сих пор таких испытаний не проводили.
But the hotspot continues to build unseen at the bottom of the core.
Еще 2 минуты и все. Шевелитесь, шевелитесь. Ну, ежели наконец все готовы, может, мы начнем испытание?
Запишите все параметры испытания турбогенератора. Мы начинаем.
2 резервных насоса.
Включить 2 резервных насоса.
Резервные насосы включены.
Хорошо.
The power to the turbine is turned off. Over the next minute, a terrifying chain of parallel events will unfold. As the turbine winds down, the pumps push less water through the reactor's core. Steam pressure builds at the core's invisible hotspot with every passing second. As the steam pressure rises, it spreads to the pump room. Perevchenko enters the huge reactor hall directly above the reactor's lid to see something never witnessed before. Steam pressure inside the core is lifting the 350 kilo caps to the fuel rods out of their sockets.
Произошел резкий скачок мощности.
Я включаю систему аварийного снижения мощности.
Pressing the emergency AZ5 button automatically lowers the ball and control rods to reduce power, but it has an unforeseen and fatal effect.
Это не у меня, Анатолий Степанович, происходит. Это у Столярчука.
Реактивность удваивается каждую секунду.
Это невозможно.
Уровень мощности превысил 530 мегаватт.
Наконечники срывает с крышки реактора.
Steam pressure at the reactor's hotspot can't be contained. 50 control and fuel rod shafts are torn apart. Power rockets, turning the whole reactor into a volcanic steam pressure cooker.
Куда делся свет?
Нет, что случилось?
Пропало питание!
Это
Что?
не
Это у тебя опять? Что
Посмотри
происходит?
немедленно.
Куда смотреть?
Акимов, сбегай к Столярчуку!
Куда энергия девалась?
Что случилось?
Никто не знает.
Почему света? Скорее, 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 посмотрите все.
Посмотрите на пульт.
Что показывают датчики?
With the 500-ton safety cap blown off and air being sucked in below, the reactor becomes a giant blowtorch, blasting 50 tons of nuclear fuel into the atmosphere, 10 times Hiroshima. The control room operators are far enough away from the reactor's core to survive the explosion, but some will wish they had not. Many will face days, weeks, even years of agony as radiation burns them to death from the inside.
Что это? Война. Я пойду к себе на пост.
Там люди! Помоги!
На главном корпусе, третий, четвертый, между третьим и четвертым. А там люди есть? Да, поднимай над состав. Поднимаю, начальника поднял. Так, всех, весь офицерский состав, офицерский корпус поднимать. Леонид Алексеевич. Да. Алло, прибыль, 3 и 4 блок горит крыша в результате аварии взрыва. Ой, его, давай.
By the morning of April the 26th, the KGB was filming the devastated scene of the worst nuclear accident in history. Whoever shot this declassified KGB footage absorbed a massive dose of radiation. The next day, the people of Pripyat were officially told the worst.
На Чернобыльской атомной электростанции в городе Припять складывается неблагоприятная радиационная обстановка. С целью обеспечения полной безопасности людей и в первую очередь детей возникает необходимость провести временную эвакуацию жителей города в близлежащие населенные пункты Киевской области.
Вечером следующего дня я уже...
The radiation count was so high, the flashes from it burned straight onto this film. A 30-kilometer zone of exclusion was declared, a zone frozen in time like a modern Pompeii. Over 600,000 Soviet men and women were brought in to contain the radioactivity. They worked in hellish, often chaotic conditions, with extraordinary bravery in order to safeguard the rest of the world. Many of them had no protective clothing whatsoever. Everything they touched burned with radioactivity. The poisonous cloud spread beyond borders, across much of the northern hemisphere. Washed into the earth by the rain, the radioactive dust lives on in plants, animals, and human beings. Within the Soviet Union, in the changing times of a new openness, the political effect was profound.
Все вы знаете, недавно нас постигла беда. Авария на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции.
It may seem difficult to believe, but we know more about this nuclear accident than the people living in the Soviet Union. The Soviet media downplaying the disaster, keeping the people there in the dark.
На Чернобыльской атомной электростанции произошла авария. Поврежден один из атомных реакторов. Принимаются меры по ликвидации последствий аварии. Пострадавшим оказывается помощь. Создана правительственная комиссия.
Moscow television claimed the Western media are spreading rumors.
We will show a photograph taken by one of the workers at the Chernobyl nuclear plant, taken just after. So there is no gigantic damage, and there is no great fires, and there aren't thousands of people dead.
Buonasera. Le conseguenze del disastro nella centrale nucleare di Chernobyl in Unione Sovietica concentrano quasi totalmente l'attenzione di tutto il mondo. Le autorità di Mosca confermano che, al contrario da quanto detto da più parti, l'incidente ha fatto solo 2 morti, mentre quasi 200 sono le persone ricoverate in ospedale.
All day there was speculation that a meltdown had occurred in a second reactor at the Chernobyl complex. Tonight, however, that seems unlikely. There are conflicting reports coming out of the Soviet Union. We do know that a zone of deadly radiation is being released from the damaged plant, and the accident is far from over.
Good evening. A senior government minister admitted to the Commons today that after Chernobyl, it was no good scientists and politicians simply asserting that everything is all right with nuclear power.
Выше! Вова! Держи это место! Держи! Держи! Где дым идет? Где дым?
This is what the Soviet government tried to cover up. A catastrophic nuclear accident, something the world had never seen before. Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant had exploded, releasing lethal amounts of radiation into the atmosphere. In this photograph taken by Igor Kostin, radiation can visibly be seen as it contaminates the photographic film within his camera. In this control room, Leonid Toptonov, a young but senior technician, began an experiment which led to an extremely unstable reactor configuration. To this day, many of the switches remain untouched, still in the same position they were the morning of the accident. As the reactor core lay exposed, a plume of highly radioactive smoke continued to rise into the skies. Chernobyl, located 82 miles north of Ukraine's capital city Kiev, was once a small town located in the far east of the Soviet Union. Nuclear fallout from the explosion was initially spread hundreds of miles, carried by the wind in clouds. Neighbouring towns and cities were heavily contaminated. However, nearly 1,000 miles from Chernobyl, Sweden was the first country to detect that something disastrous had happened. The fallout had even reached the United Kingdom. North Wales had been contaminated the worst, and even to this day, 330 hill farms have restrictions on them. The darker orange areas of this map are badly contaminated, and the red areas are severely contaminated with cesium-137, an isotope released into the atmosphere by the reactor explosion. The result was, and still is, devastating. Belarus was by far the worst affected, life-changing effects. Some of these effects are illnesses like thyroid cancer, birth defects like dysplasia, deformation, intellectual disabilities, pain and suffering, and all caused by an invisible force. London, one of the largest and busiest cities in the world. Radiation can be found here and all other cities. Known as background radiation, it is constantly present in the environment of Earth, which is emitted by natural and artificial sources. A normal background radiation level is considered to be between 0.10 and 0.30 microsieverts, a measure of radiation dose. These tanks were used during the evacuation of Chernobyl and Pripyat. Nikolai explains more.
Here it's already 16, yeah, but closer it's increasing, 9, so it's already 90 times more than normal. But I think it's absolutely enough. 0.2, 0.15. .13, so it's okay. All places in Chernobyl are clean. So these robots, they have been on the roof of third reactor, of third unit. They were broken a few days after because the radiation fields pretty highly contaminated. So it's about 20-25 microsieverts. Those guys, they were heroes. Those 28 firefighters, they came first. They came 2 minutes after the blast, so they didn't know anything about radiation. They didn't have any protection, and they received huge doses of radiation, then died a couple of weeks after. They sacrificed their own lives to save millions of another. Hotspot is here, 150, 64. Come on, 200. Yes. Whoa. Excellent sound. 3.4, 3.5, 6, 8, 6 milli, 6.2. Enough.
Pripyat was founded in 1970 to house workers for the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It was officially proclaimed a city in 1979, but was abandoned following the Chernobyl disaster. Pripyat was a modern city, ahead of its time and home to around 50,000 people before the accident. Pripyat is located less than 2.5 miles away from the power plant. It had a defined city centre where the city hall, the largest shopping centres, major recreational facilities, restaurants and bars were located. The day after the accident, the City Council of Pripyat informed its residents they need to temporarily evacuate due to deteriorating radioactive conditions. They recommended its people to take their documents, some vital personal belongings, and to ensure that lights were turned off, electrical equipment and water off, and windows shut. The council insisted that everyone remained calm and orderly in the process of a short-term evacuation. Pripyat's people would never return.
This is the main square. That Palace of Culture. And the rest of buildings are usual apartments.